Hello, it's Cindy, and we have no intro music and no fanfare. It is just me and you, and a moment that wrecked me with art and made me more alive. Welcome to Wrecked by Art. And today, since it's the first official episode of Wrecked by Art, I have to tell you the first and most powerful experience that I've had with being wrecked by art. And I've told this story on the podcast before, or very early in the podcast when it was still focused on teachers. And I've told this story in my book, Art is About Being Whole, a memoir. And if you are a member of my Patreon, you will get the first chapter of my book read as a bonus podcast episode about this artwork. Let me tell you the story of this artwork and what it did for me. It was New Year's Day, 2004. So I would have been 23 years old. At the time in my life, I was working at a art museum as a gallery teacher. It was the Aaron Carter Museum of American Art in Fort Worth, Texas. And I was teaching all the kids tours and stuff. And I had a bachelor's degree in art history. And at the time, I was applying to get my PhD in art history. I had already taken the GREs. I had already sent off some of my applications. I was applying to graduate schools all across the country for a PhD in art history. I wanted to focus on modern art. And also, that time in my life was riddled with anxiety, social anxiety especially. Lots of shame, lots of feelings that I wasn't lovable or likable. I was very rough around the edges. I was just a mess. It was before I knew about my autism, before I knew about my ADHD, before I knew about CPTSD, before I knew my sexuality, it was before I knew all the things that I now know. And I had some trauma in my life of a father who was an alcoholic who had left when I was in the third grade and kind of never came back. I saw him a couple times after that. So I had these sort of deep feelings of abandonment. I had a lot of body issues, feelings of not feeling comfortable in my skin and, just stuck in that like diet culture mentality that you have to be perfect and thin and all this stuff. So there was so much that I was dealing with. And it was a time in the world where the internet was still very new. In 2004, yes, we had the internet, but I don't even think we had, we didn't have Facebook yet. I think we had MySpace. Oh, we had AOL and IRC chat rooms and different things, but we didn't have the place to find people like us like we have now on the internet. Now we have podcasts and we have TikToks and we have social media and we have group programs run with people around the world all coming together in a Zoom room and around something that they love. But we didn't have that back then. And so it's very much an alone feeling because you thought you were the only one that felt that way. There was a lot of stigma with mental health stuff. There was a lot of misunderstanding of mental health stuff. I didn't even know what social anxiety was, what general anxiety was. Definitely didn't know CPTSD. I didn't learn that until the last few years. And it was just very much a feeling of being alone, but also feeling that my love and my connection to art was what pulled me through. It is what lit my fire. It was my spark. It was my reason and my purpose and my love. And the more time I spent with art, the better I felt. And the more at home I felt. And the more like me I felt. So that's all the context. I was married. We had just gotten married. This to say January 1st, 2004. We had just gotten married 4 or 5 months before. And me and my husband went to an art museum together. And I live in Dallas. At the time, I lived in Fort Worth. And the MoMA, the Modern Art Museum of New York City, the one that has, all the famous artworks. It has Dali's Persistence of Memory. It has Starry Night, Van Gogh. It has Monet's Water Lilies. It has like the famous Kandinsky things. It's got all these like big famous works of modern art. And at the time I was poor and there was no chance of me going to New York City ever and anytime soon. It would have been another 10 years before I finally made it to New York City. But they had to close the MoMA for renovations. And so they sent the art on tour. And I think it went to 2 places, but they sent it to the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston, which is an amazing art museum. And so I was like, we're going. It's a 4-hour drive. We absolutely have to go. This is going to be my last chance to see these artworks for a long time. I don't know when we're ever going to have the amount of money that we need to be able to go to travel to New York City. So we drove down to the MoMA in one day, drove there, went to the exhibit, drove back home because we couldn't afford a hotel room. And I knew it was going to be impactful. I have, at this point in my life, cried in front of works of art before. I've had emotional moments with works of art. But this was by far the biggest one that I had up until this point, probably the biggest one I've ever had. And it really did change the trajectory of my career and what I wanted to focus on. And both changed my career and deeply impacted my internal state as well. So it hit me in 2 ways. Picture a big exhibit, super crowded. It's a holiday day. Everybody's home for the holiday. They got their families there, and there's this big exhibit. And so it's really crowded. And everybody has got their audio guide. And so they're going from piece to piece with the audio guides and crowding in front of the works of art that I desperately wanted to look at, but they were all in my way. So I go in, and in the first room is Starry Night and some Van Goghs. And I was like, ooh, those are neat. Though I actually was pretty underwhelmed by Starry Night. I was expecting it to be grander in person. And actually in person, I was a little bit let down with like the canvas behind it. Like you could see the canvas. I think now would be a totally different experience. But at the time, I was just like a little bit underwhelmed. I liked the one next to it better. There was the last one he painted with the birds and the, what's it called? And the crows and the hayfield. I don't remember the name of that artwork, but I think that's the one that was next to it. So anywho, I'm walking through this exhibit, looking at the art. Ooh, it's great. And then I turn the corner into the next space. And I can see it so vividly, and I don't even really see things vividly in my head. I don't have like that clear vision. But I walk through this doorway, I look to the right, and on the wall was Pablo Picasso's Girl Before a Mirror. And I felt like I was punched in the stomach. Like the wind was knocked out of me. And I wish I could fully convey how wrecked I was in that split second of seeing that artwork. I beelined to it. And thankfully it wasn't on the audio guide tour. So no one else was looking at it because most people were just looking at what's on the audio guide. No judgment there. That's fine. Do whatever you want. But I couldn't leave it. I cried. I was completely mesmerized. It's huge in person. It's like 4 feet by 6 feet. So it's big. It's taller than I am. And so this figure is life size. So in this painting, and I invite you to go look at the link in the show notes. If you want to look at the artwork, please don't do it while you're driving. Check out the artwork. You can also find the artwork, an image of it in my book, Art is About Being Whole, a memoir. But in the artwork, it has a woman, and it's Picasso's like legendary style, kind of that like broken, fractured style. It's really bold colored lines. He had a lot of different periods of artistic style, and this one is his like most recognizable Picasso style. I think I've heard it called the legendary style, but I actually don't know what the like official style name is. But it has this woman, and she is kind of broken apart, but like she's got blonde hair and she's got what looks like rosy cheeks, like maybe like she has makeup on. Like there's these beautiful pastel purples, and this woman is definitely put together as much as you could call a Picasso woman put together. Like she just seems like on the outside, she has it all together. But she has her hands holding onto each side of the mirror, and in the mirror is her reflection. And her reflection is different. It is deep purples. It is orange and red. She has this orange tear coming out of her eye. She has this whole big like teal spot that covers her whole face. Her face has this red to it. That blonde hair is not there anymore. It's like this teal line. Like it is different. And to me, it was deeply emotional seeing that reflection. And I instantly recognized that reflection as reflecting her internal inner experience. And at the time, like I said, I was suffering with a lot of feelings that I didn't understand. And I hadn't been to therapy before yet. I had only scratched the surface. I'd found some books on social anxiety at the library. I found a book, Adult Children of Alcoholics, at the library. Like I had read those books, but like my internal world was not well understood. I didn't understand why I had such a hard time in life. I didn't understand why I had a hard time with people. I didn't understand why I would get so anxious and overwhelmed, and how I didn't know how to make friends. I didn't know how to keep friends. I didn't know how to be an adult. I didn't, like there was just so much that I didn't know, but I was desperately trying to appear perfect and appear like I had it all together and appear smart, appear organized, appear successful, ambitious, impressive. Like these were my masks. These were the things that gave me value, because I didn't feel value in just who I was. And this woman in the painting on the left is this sort of polished, put together person, but on the inside is the pain, the dripping purple tear, the deep purples and blues, and like the sadness. All I could see was the sadness reflected back in the mirror, and the grief. And I cried, and I saw myself reflected back. And then also, I'm seeing myself reflected and mirrored in this work of art. I'm seeing this kind of deep connection to my humanity. I'm feeling this deep connection to the artist as I'm looking at his brushstrokes, and I'm imagining him painting this. And I love to see artists that show their hand, that have fingerprints or bold lines or drips, so you can see their process. And Picasso for me was as problematic as he is or was, like his art to me had always captivated me. I've always been captivated by his art. I'd been to the Picasso Museum in Paris when I did study abroad, and when I was in high school, I had been to the Kimball Art Museum. We had taken a trip from Amarillo, where I grew up, to Dallas to go to this exhibit with my humanities class. And like, it was just, he was an important artist to me. And I've always been drawn to color, and I've always been drawn to like really bold things. And so, yeah, Picasso was my favorite artist at the time. Not anymore, but what also happened is I felt and recognized the magic of art. And I knew the magic of art. I had an art history degree. I had been obsessed with art my whole life. Like I knew the magic of art. But in that moment, like that feeling that I was able to get immediately, I didn't think my way to interpret this artwork. I didn't think my way into this experience. I felt this experience. I saw the painting, felt it in my body first, and it overtook me. I could not leave this painting. My husband did the entire rest of the exhibit, came back around, and I was still standing in front of that painting. I could not leave it. And even when we were done, I had to go back one more time because I was like, I have to see it one more time. I'm like, I didn't time it, but I'm sure it was an hour. I mean, at least. And like, I could not leave this painting. And I am building worlds in my head about this painting and the magic of art. And I am swimming in the colors of it. And I am trying to memorize it. And I was so scared that if I walked away, if I stopped looking at it, that it wouldn't be the same and that it would lose its magic. Like, I did not want to walk away because I didn't want to lose that feeling. And that was the moment. That was the moment of, this is the feeling I'm chasing. This is the feeling I want. And I don't have a name for it. And I'm tearing up even thinking about it, but I didn't have a name for it. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew that it was something important. And I get in the car and I write a whole ass essay about it. It's like 4 pages. I still have it, about the experience and what it felt like. And one of the things that I realized standing in front of Picasso's Girl Before a Mirror was that I don't care about the context of this painting. I don't care about Picasso's life. Okay, maybe it's interesting or whatever. But in that moment, it wasn't, I'm looking at a masterpiece by a master artist who changed art, and this is how he changed art, and this is the history of art, and what rules he broke, and what innovation he did, and what happened next in art history. Like, I didn't care about any of that. The art history to me was nothing compared to the emotional impact of that painting and that emotional experience that I had. And I was applying for PhDs in art history, and I thought, what if I learn too much and the art loses its magic? What if spending my time analyzing and reading texts and reading other people's interpretations and learning more about the artists and all of that stuff, like, what if that removes the humanity of the experience and removes that visceral emotional response that happens when someone's art reaches out to you and grabs you like that? I didn't know what that was, but I did call it magic then, and I call it magic now. I didn't want art to lose its magic, and that was the first time where I recognized that magic, and I named it magic. And nothing has been the same since. I scrapped all of my applications to get a PhD. I was like, nope, can't do it. And I knew in that moment that I needed and wanted other people to experience art. I wanted other people to understand this magic and feel this magic and feel what it does to them and feel that feeling of being seen, which, like I said back then, it was not something that you got to feel as a closeted, undiagnosed neurodivergent, as someone with trauma, as someone who felt too much, as someone who felt all that pain and shame. Like, I didn't feel seen ever in my life. I just felt different and alien and wrong. And I looked at this painting and I saw myself and I felt seen. And that was true magic. And it's why I'm so passionate about art. And this was 21 years ago and a half. And I'm still captivated by the power of art and its ability to change us and its ability to make a powerful impact on a person. Like, it is everything to me. And so this podcast, Wrecked by Art, is about these moments. And I'm going to share a lot of personal stories about my moments of being wrecked by art. I have lots of them. This is the first big one, but I have a lot of them. These stories are going to be long or short or whatever they are, but I also truly would love to hear about your experiences being wrecked by art. What experience have you had that changed you? Was it a poem? Was it a book? Was it a single line or scene in a book? Was it a TV show? Was it a moment in a movie? Was it a song? Was it a moment in theater? Like, when have you been wrecked by art and what happened? And I want to tell your story too. So I would love to invite you to send me an email or a voice note telling me your story, and maybe we can set up a time to talk and you can be on the podcast and share your story with our listeners. But the first step would be just telling me your story. You don't have to go into all the details unless you really want to. I would love to hear every detail. I'm obsessed with this. I'll read every word and relish every word of your story. But even if I don't get any emails, I have lots and lots of stories to tell about art and what it does for us and what it does for humans. And it's so big in its power. It's so big in its specificity. It's something so personal to the artist can be so magnificently huge for an individual. It can be so huge for a society. There's been artworks that I've been personally wrecked by that also made a difference in history. But, art is just, it's everything. It's everything. So I'm so excited about this podcast. I feel like that moment, January 1st, 2004, is the first moment that led to me here today with this podcast. And so I'm happy to tell this story because it's a foundational, it's like Cindy Lore 101. If you've been following me for a while, you know that you've probably heard this story again and again, but I love it. I love what it does for us. I love art. So thank you for listening to my story. Please subscribe to the podcast. You can do it on your favorite podcast app. You can also do it on Substack. You can join my new Patreon. And the bonus podcast episode for this episode is a recording of me reading chapter 1 of my book, which is about this experience. So it's the same story, but you'll hear it told in a different way. My book has poetry and things like that. So you'll see just a little bit of a different take on the spoken word versus written word. So that will be on my Patreon, which is patreon.com/rectbyart. But you can find all of that, of course, in the show notes. So thank you so much for listening today. I'm going to keep this podcast raw and real. We're not going to have the opening music and closing music and highly edited and all that. It's just going to be me telling my stories, unscripted. And yeah, please feel free to reach out and follow me on TikTok, Threads. Those are my 2 favorite social medias. All the things. But all that is in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening. And come back on Friday next week for another story of me being wrecked by art. Bye.